Hello and welcome everyone to the DuraSpace Services webinar series. This is the first webinar in the 2015 accomplishments and a 2016 sneak peek. That happens to be a tongue twister. My name is Carissa Smith and I am the services manager at DuraSpace, and I manage all of the services under the DuraSpace umbrella, including the two that I will be talking about today. The direct services, DSpaceDirect and ArchivesDirect. The next webinar in the series will be devoted to the cloud services, DuraCloud, and the new to be released DuraCloud Vault service. But with that, I will get started. I believe we have about an hour. I will only be taking up about 40 minutes or so of presentation, and then I want to give ample time for questions as well. My presentation style is very informal, so please feel free to insert questions into the chat feature on the left-hand side of your screen. As I go through today's presentation, you don't have to wait until the end. I want to be sure to address questions or comments as I'm talking about a topic, and really this webinar series is meant to be informative for you folks in the audience, so please do not hesitate to insert questions or comments in the chat, and I will be monitoring that as I'm speaking today, and we'll address the questions as they come up. So with that, I will get started. Let me just double check. Recording is on. I have the music turned off. I think we're good to go. I can see my microphone is transmitting. So with that, I'll move to the next slide. I'll be starting talking about DSpaceDirect today, and then I will transition the second half of the presentation talking about ArchivesDirect. As a point of reference for both services, I'll be talking a little bit about the background, painting a picture about the service features, functionality, and benefits. There'll be some screenshots. I'll talk about the subscription plans and how the pricing is structured, and then I will end talking about some of the upcoming items on the docket for 2016. And again, as folks are chiming in on the line today, please don't hesitate to insert questions into the chat feature. It should be in the bottom left of your screen as I go through today's presentation. All right, so I think that is it of the housekeeping. So DSpaceDirect was launched by the DuraSpace organization and available to the public in March of 2014, so just over a year and a half ago. Prior to the official launch of the service, we did beta test the service for about a year with a small number of institutions to really flesh out the features and functionality included in the service, as well as to determine the best pricing structure and some of the kind of procurement details for the DSpaceDirect service. So that happened at the end of 2013 and end of 2013, right up into the beginning of 2014 before we launched the service to the public. For those of you who are not familiar with the DSpaceDirect service at all, I thought it would be helpful to put up a little cheat formula. And really, DSpaceDirect is comprised of the DSpace open source software plus DuraCloud in one hosted service package. So for those of you, again, taking a step back who are not familiar with DSpace, it is an open source software project, a global open source software project with users distributed across the globe. And development happens in an open source community-based way. That open source software in a hosted environment that is integrated with DuraCloud equals DSpaceDirect. And again, it is hosted by the DuraSpace not-for-profit organization. Again, DSpace itself, and then by extension, DSpaceDirect is really around hosting repository type documents, materials, images, audio, video, that sort of thing, with the goal of providing access to your constituents, easy discovery of those materials, and with DuraCloud integrated with the offering automatic content preservation. And I'll be talking in much more detail about that here in just a moment. But to give you an overview of the DSpaceDirect service and how I would summarize it, it's just DSpace plus DuraCloud. In the last year and a half, of course, we have signed up a large group of customers, certainly in the academic library, community college library and archive space, as you might expect. The DuraSpace community is comprised of those types of organizations. But DSpaceDirect has also been of interest and in use by government agencies, as well as professional associations and centers and discipline-specific repositories. We've seen a good number of organizations that fit into those categories as well, adopting DSpaceDirect for what I suspect to be a few different reasons. The DSpaceDirect service itself is quite cost-effective. And as you'll see in the features and functionality here in a moment, it's very quick and easy to get started. It doesn't take dedicated hardware or software or really staffing. So I think it fits into the needs of many of these smaller, sometimes volunteer-based organizations. But enough foreshadowing on my next slide. Let me move into the high-level benefits of the service itself. I think due to the nature of the fact that it is entirely hosted, the first bullet on the screen, fast startup, is a no-brainer. It does not require customers who decide to subscribe to DSpaceDirect to do really anything in terms of procuring hardware, installing software, or provisioning staff resources. Really, all that is required is an internet connection, a browser, of course, and then content to start depositing into the service if you're ready to do so. As you'll see here in a minute, lots of foreshadowing on these slides. The service itself comes with a laundry list of features and functionality that you can, as the administrator on your account, choose to enable or not, or disable, if that makes sense. So it is quite customizable from that perspective, and I'll talk about some of the very specific ways you can customize your instance here momentarily. I think one of the other really great benefits of the service that I've heard from customers in the past year and a half is the fact that upgrades of the software are included as part of the subscription and do not require any customer action whatsoever. So as the DSpace open source community develops new features and functionality and makes new releases of the DSpace open source software available, they are automatically rolled into the DSpaceDirect customer subscriptions. And we schedule those upgrades at a time that's convenient, certainly for our customers, and they essentially happen overnight, and new features and functionality automatically become available to DSpaceDirect users without them having to perform any technical actions or devote any staff resources to those upgrades. So that has been a huge time savings for many of the institutions that we work with. Due to the fact that a DSpaceDirect instance is automatically tied or integrated with DuraCloud, the content that is deposited into the repository is copied and then stored in DuraCloud as well. So that is where the automatic content preservation piece comes into the benefit of DSpaceDirect, the service. So not only is an additional replica copy being stored as part of the subscription, there are also additional preservation services that DuraCloud is running over your repository content to ensure that the integrity of the content is maintained for however many years it happens to be stored in the cloud. It's in a completely different technical hardware stack and a different location as well. So it does check the box on a few different preservation best practices for storing your preservation repository content. From a more practical perspective, certainly following preservation best practices is fantastic, but on a day-to-day basis, what that enables for DSpaceDirect customers is additional insurance against accidental deletes or content loss. You can very easily restore or retrieve content from your preservation copy all through the DSpaceDirect administrator interface. So it does protect you against user error, accidental content deletes, or any other issues that you may encounter. You can automatically restore material from DuraCloud quite easily. Again, due to the nature of the service being entirely hosted and web-based, you have access to your data at any point in time. Of course, the one caveat there is that you have to have an internet connection. But certainly you have access to your materials. Nothing is locked away and unavailable, specifically to content administrators, of course. And I think related to that is the second to last bullet on the slide, in the fact that you, the DSpaceDirect customer, own your data. We make it very explicit in the DSpaceDirect service level agreement that the copyright, the ownership, and the responsibility of the data is entirely yours, the customer, and you are not giving up any rights whatsoever to the DuraSpace organization who is hosting the service. And again, I think tangentially related to that is the fact that the content that you store in your repository is exactly the content that you have access at any time to, that you can download at any point in time, that you can migrate to another system. We are not running any proprietary software, nor are we doing any proprietary packaging of your materials when you use DSpaceDirect, or when the content is preserved in DuraCloud. So what you put in, PDFs, Word documents, images, audio files, SPSS files, Excel data sheets, is the exact material that you can download, retrieve, restore, etc. And it's a point that I like to make very transparent because it's tied to the DuraSpace mission, and because we are not for profit. I think a lot of our features and functionality are kind of tied somewhat implicitly to our mission, but I like to make that a point when I'm talking about the DuraSpace services. And lastly, and I know I've been talking on this one slide for quite some time now, the DSpaceDirect service, due to the fact that it is running open source DSpace software, enables you, the customer and the user of the service, to join the global user community of DSpace installations worldwide. So regardless of whether you're using DSpace in a hosted fashion with DSpaceDirect or you've installed it locally, there is a global user community talking about institutional repository best practices, use cases, functionality, deposit license agreements, all sorts of best practices and knowledge sharing around this topic. So certainly there's no reason not to join in that participation in that community conversation that's happening. And again, for people who have joined late, I saw a few hop on. Feel free to post questions in the chat feature located on the left-hand side of your screen. My sessions are pretty informal, or I try to be, so please don't hesitate to interact with me through the chat feature, and I will address questions as I see them as we go through the presentation today. Delving down a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what's included in DSpaceDirect. As I've mentioned, it is a fully hosted, managed, maintained service from the DuraSpace organization of the open source DSpace software. So DuraSpace staff install the latest release of the DSpace software, and then manage the server hardware, the system administration, the firewalls, bug fixes and patches, all of that sort of activity, nightly backups, scripted nightly backups, rolling weekly backups, etc., are all handled by DuraSpace staff as part of your subscription. And that also includes annual upgrades of the DSpace software when they're made available, as well as any bug fixes or patch releases that happen to be made available of DSpace throughout the year as well. And again, those are all included in the cost of the subscription. It's not like there's no fine print. As I've mentioned before as well, DSpaceDirect includes automatic backups and content preservation through DuraCloud as well. So there are certainly server snapshots that are happening from a system level, and then the content and the metadata from the repository DSpaceDirect is also backed up and preserved in DuraCloud as well, where additional preservation services are being run. And again, that's integrated out of the box. There's nothing required for you, the customer, to do. That happens automatically. DSpaceDirect is also integrated out of the box with the handle system from CNRI. And for those of you who are not familiar with the handle system, what that integration enables is unique and persistent identifiers, or URIs, being assigned to every single content item that you store in your repository, which is great for several reasons. It allows a unique and persistent identifier for the items, of course, but it also doesn't lock you into the DSpaceDirect system itself. You can, and Dale just asked if you already have a handle ID, you can certainly bring that over to a DSpaceDirect subscription. If you decide in 2 years that DSpaceDirect is no longer a good fit for your needs and you decide to migrate to a local installation of DSpace or another system altogether, we will gladly migrate that handle registration back to you, and you can then apply it to a local installation of DSpace or another system. So really, we're very flexible in that. We can certainly, and we have done several migrations of a handle ID registration from an institution to us for DSpaceDirect. We can handle that. And the benefit for your end users is that the content, regardless of where it's stored, whether it's in a hosted DSpaceDirect instance or on a local DSpace instance or some other system, will always be resolvable. They'll always be able to find those items regardless of where you are actually physically or managing the content storage. And then Beth Warner asks if the user agreement or deposit license for depositors can be customized by the institution. Absolutely. And to that end, you can do it all through the administrative interface, and you can even customize down to the collection level within DSpace, a collection of content. Each can have a different agreement or license depending on the nature or the needs of that collection of materials. So if you have maybe a collection that's you were given rights to from a particular publisher, but all depositors have to agree to these publisher terms, you can certainly customize that, and that again is all enabled through the administrative interface and very, very easy to implement. Great, thank you guys so much for the questions, guys and gals. Feel free to keep inserting them into the chat, and I will address them here as we go through. It's great to be able to interact with folks in that way since audio is not enabled. Okay, so additionally, DSpaceDirect instances have all been optimized for Google Scholar in particular, but certainly all of the other main search engines as well, Google, Yahoo, Bing, etc. I think this is a really great feature for many institutions who want to get their institutional output made available more broadly. As soon as you add a handful, 5 to 10 or so documents to your repository, Google Scholar will start to pick that up and index those so that they are findable within Google Scholar in particular. Catch my breath here. Of course, basic site branding is included as part of the subscription, so you can add your institutional logo and color scheme, etc. Through the administrative interface, you can also manage users, groups, and permissions for individual users or groups of users quite easily and in a straightforward manner. There's also basic usage statistics and reporting. That is a hard, complicated couple words to say together as well, or slurring them together. Available in the administrative interface. And then also on my next slide, in delving into more standard features, you can integrate your DSpaceDirect instance with Google Analytics as well, such that you can get quite a bit more detail in terms of who's accessing your repository, from where in the world, what actions are they taking, what content are they viewing, how did they find your repository, etc. Because this is a hosted service, of course, there's general customer support included in a subscription, and we also have extended support if you would like to purchase that as well. But there is obviously some general level of support included in a subscription. As you will see in just a moment when I review the subscription plans, you can upgrade your subscription and your storage needs at any time. Another great benefit of a hosted service is that it's really just as easy as flicking a switch. You don't have to purchase any hardware. You don't have to do anything locally. You just let me know that you need to upgrade your subscription. It's really like just an email is needed. There is, through the administrative interface, again, the ability to customize the approval workflow for deposits that are going into your repository. Again, that can be at the collection level if you so choose. And related to that, and back to Beth's question, you can customize the deposit license for all of the materials that are going into your repository at a very fine-grained level as well. You can additionally and optionally batch edit metadata for materials that are stored in your repository, and you can also batch upload content all through the web interface as well. I think, as I've harped on a couple times here, the entire DSpaceDirect system is open source. Both DSpace and DuraCloud are open source software packages. DuraSpace organization is just hosting those on our customers' behalves. We are behalves. Yeah, sounded strange. We are not running any proprietary code whatsoever. So I like to be very, very point blank about that. At any point in time, you can decide to move away from DSpaceDirect. I think, again, tied to the open source nature of the service itself. You can migrate to a locally hosted DSpace installation. I think the one caveat there is that we are running, the DuraSpace organization, is running DSpaceDirect on the latest release of the DSpace open source software. So if you're going to migrate locally, we can assist you to do that, but you would need to be running one of the latest releases of DSpace, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone. And then there are additional optional features available depending on your particular needs. I didn't want to delve into those today to take up too much time, but some examples are having a URL that matches your institution URL, integrating Shibboleth or LDAP. There's a handful of add-ons that are all listed on the website if that's of interest. So I've mentioned a few times, and I wanted to just quickly talk about the subscription plans and how DSpaceDirect is structured. So there are three kind of scripted plans: small, medium, and large. All of the features and functionality that I mentioned are included in each of these packages. So I think that's another differentiator with DSpaceDirect. Every single plan has all of the same features and functionality. The single difference is how much content you would need to store annually to make the differentiator. So the small plan is at 75 gigabytes for $3,750 a year, and then it tiers up to the large for $8,250 a year. That includes 250 gigabytes of storage, and then I create custom quotes for anything larger than that, simply because the cost goes down per gigabyte as you add more content to the service. Okay, so Maria asks if the product is configurable, not only customizable for functionality and branding. We do draw the line, Maria. We will enable configurations and customizations to the extent that they do not require the core code to be manipulated or changed. So that's kind of where we draw the line, depending on what the configuration or customization is. Determines whether I can say yes or no. So for instance, we will not enable JavaScript on the main page of our DSpaceDirect customers page. Customers do not have code level access to their instances for security purposes because it is a hosted environment. That is not enabled at this time. So really great question. Thank you for that clarification. Let me know if it brings up any other questions. But essentially, any customization that would require us to change Java code on your installation, we do not enable in DSpaceDirect. Typically, that gets you in the realm of a more customized instance of a hosted DSpace, and there are other service providers who do that. And I could certainly give you a list as well. So again, one last note about pricing. We are running a promotion through the end of this calendar year, so by December 31st. Any new customers coming in the door who want to use DSpaceDirect in the small and medium plans get 10% off their first year subscription, and anything large or larger get 15% off their first year subscription. So again, that could be up to $1,237 in cost savings. I did the math for you. So if that's of interest, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. John asks if DSpace supports languages other than English. It does, John. There are a handful of languages that it can support, that there have been translation packages enabled for. I don't know them off the top of my head, and it's not an exhaustive list. It's a relatively short list. However, we could enable any language if the customer had the translation package or was willing to create that translation package. So that's translating a lot of the just general interface itself, the home button, some of that. We've talked about doing that for several customers in the past, though it hasn't come to fruition at this point. But yes, does support other languages. I can pass along the list. I have to dig around for it. And then if your language is not supported, but you know of someone who would be willing to translate the interface and provide us with that, we could enable it. All right, so again, thank you all for the questions. Please feel free to keep inserting them, and I will address them as I spy them on the side here. Again, just a note about the promotional pricing. We are running it through the end of the year. If you'd like to find out more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email will be here at the end. A few examples. I know it can get boring looking at text on slides, so I wanted to point out some examples of current DSpaceDirect customer instances. The American Library Association's institutional repository is a DSpaceDirect instance. And you can see on the screen how they've decided to brand their repository. In a similar layout, DSpaceDirect instances all give a very similar kind of look and feel, though you are able to add your logo, of course, as a Delaware County Community College digital repository. And you can see how they've structured their materials. And then for a slightly different look and feel, with the navigation on the right-hand side, is my DSpaceDirect demonstration repository, which feel free to navigate to in another browser if you'd like. It's demo.dspacedirect.org, and I can put that in the chat if you'd like to just poke around while I'm talking. And then lastly, before I move over to ArchivesDirect, I just wanted to talk about a few upcoming 2016 sneak peeks. These are, what's on the slide is DSpace open source community development initiatives, but they will directly feed into the DSpaceDirect offering. So later this year or early 2016, DSpace 6.0 will be released. The open source development community is currently working on adding new features and functionality in the next release of DSpace. I was perusing their actions and activities last week, and they've already enabled local object identifiers in DSpace 6.0, so you can have a handle URI as well as a local identifier for your content stored in DSpace. There will be extensions to the REST API, which as a DSpaceDirect customer, you have access to the REST API as well as to the OAI PNH interface within DSpace/DSpaceDirect. And there will likely be a lot more features and functionality in DSpace 6. It's still a few months away from release, and I know the developers are actively working on a lot of great new features and functionality. But when that is released, again, likely no later than early next year, within a month or two time frame, it will be rolled around and available in DSpaceDirect as well. One of the most fascinating initiatives that has cropped up in the DSpace community this year is a user interface modernization effort. And they are actively, this group is actively prototyping new modern interfaces for DSpaceDirect that will enable the community to converge on one single interface, um, tentatively scheduled for the next release of DSpace 7.0 in late 2016. And certainly what that will mean for DSpaceDirect customers is access to a new modern look and feel of the repository and the interface. And I suspect there will be a lot of great features and functionality enabled in this new interface as well. I put this on the slide specifically to call out any volunteers who may be interested in participating in the user interface discussions for DSpace. It is a volunteer community discussion that's happening, and anybody's use case is more than welcome to be recorded and included in the prototyping and development efforts that will be happening throughout this year and next year as well. So I would strongly encourage anybody who even has a remote interest in this to participate. I think there might be monthly conference calls and a lot of documentation and discussion offline on listservs, etc., regarding this. But it's really a really exciting rejuvenation and a really good effort to move the interface forward. Okay, so I'm going to transition to ArchivesDirect now. And again, for everybody on the line, feel free to insert questions. ArchivesDirect is the newest in the DuraSpace suite of services. It was launched in earlier this year in April. Prior to that, of course, we did some beta testing with, again, a small group of institutions. But the formula for ArchivesDirect, and I know there has been some confusion in the community around ArchivesDirect, especially because there are similarly named services or software, Archivum, ArchivesDirect, ArchivesSpace. I'm sure there are a few more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but ArchivesDirect is the Archivematica open source software integrated with the DuraCloud open source software that is hosted by DuraSpace. So Archivematica plus DuraCloud equals ArchivesDirect. The summary of what the service offers is that it creates standard-based digital preservation packages and then stores them in secure long-term storage in DuraCloud. So the Archivematica piece of the software handles the digital preservation package creation, and then the preservation storage is handled by DuraCloud. This is a DuraSpace managed service, but it is in partnership with our colleagues at Artifactual Systems, who are the developers of Archivematica, and for ArchivesDirect provide support, training, and expert consulting for ArchivesDirect. Artifactual has on staff certified archivists, so it's a really, how many times can I say really? I apologize. The partnership between the archival expertise in Artifactual Systems and the cloud-based hosting and preservation expertise at DuraSpace was really a win-win and has been a really fruitful partnership. So ArchivesDirect is the best of both of those, again, with the partnership between Artifactual Systems and the DuraSpace organization. This benefits slide will probably sound remotely similar to the DSpaceDirect slide. Again, there are some high-level benefits of a hosted service that are true for both, in the fact that you can get started quickly and do not need any hardware or software locally in order to get started. And because both DSpaceDirect and ArchivesDirect are integrated with DuraCloud out of the box, again, you can check the box for automatic content preservation of your digital materials. You have access to your content at any point in time, all through either the ArchivesDirect interface or through DuraCloud, again, assuming you have an internet connection and a browser. Archivematica, and thus the front end for ArchivesDirect, follows all open standards, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the metadata standards and preservation standards here in just a moment. But through the interface, you have complete control of your content. The microservices and the preservation services that are run over your content as it's processed and then transferred to DuraCloud is entirely up to you to administer. The service itself, because it is the coupling of two open source software packages, certainly there's a community of users around both that you can draw knowledge from or join the community and the discussions around. Again, very similar to what I was mentioning with DSpaceDirect. And again, I feel like I am a broken record here, but I do think it is important to stress this. I can't stress it enough that there is no vendor or content lock-in with ArchivesDirect either. Of course, the content that you ingest into ArchivesDirect and process through is following all open standards. You can download your material at any point in time. You can re-ingest it into an Access front end. You can store it locally. You can essentially do what you wish with your content because you are entirely in control, and there's no proprietary software packaging that is disabling you from being able to do that. And I think one of the specifically unique features of ArchivesDirect is that it is infinitely customizable to match various things, your particular needs at your institution, or the processes that you already have in place or are putting into place locally to process your digital content. You may have workflows already in place for some materials or particular needs for subsets of the types of content that you have that ArchivesDirect and the interface can help to either continue or create as you begin or continue on your preservation plans locally. Again, not to sound like, again, a broken record, it is fully hosted, of course. It's completely web-based. There is no need to install any software locally. We provide easy tools and training for those tools for transferring your content and preparing it to be processed in ArchivesDirect. DSpaceDirect and ArchivesDirect both are content agnostic, so you can throw any type of file at it and it will store it. And in ArchivesDirect case, it will process it, including email and forensic disk images. ArchivesDirect is robust enough to handle even those types of file formats. How many times can I underscore that it's backed up and integrated with DuraCloud? I think I've mentioned that enough, so I'll skip that bullet. From a front-end, kind of more detailed perspective, ArchivesDirect allows you to customize the workflows to pretty much down to the dotting of the I and the crossing of the T. And then you can, once you've customized them, you can pre-configure them or save them such that in the screen that I'll show in just a few slides, once you make your kind of initial decisions, you can rerun that configured customized workflow over all of your materials as you process them. Or you can go back and reconfigure. It is quite sophisticated from that perspective. It does follow all OAIS. I have to say that slowly so I don't slur it together. OAIS-based workflows. There is a biblically long list of preservation microservices that you can, again, enable or disable through the ArchivesDirect interface. It does normalize the files. It can normalize unless you turn it off, the files that you are processing through ArchivesDirect, and it creates standards compliant premise metadata, METs, and it can follow the Bagot Library of Congress spec as well. On the back end is the DuraCloud piece. The preservation storage is actually replicated in two separate locations. So for the flat ArchivesDirect subscription price, you actually get 2 copies of your content at all times. Content stored in DuraCloud, as I believe I mentioned earlier, is constantly undergoing integrity checks, typically on a quarterly basis, to ensure that your preservation content is not experiencing any bit rot, bit loss, or other integrity issues as it's being stored. And you have access to those reports as well in the DuraCloud interface. So if that's something that you need or would like to audit on a regular basis, you can download those reports and ensure that your archival content is indeed healthy. And of course, as I've mentioned, you can download your materials at any point in time quite easily, and I'll show that interface here in just a moment. As I've mentioned, again, I wanted to cover subscription plans and how they're structured for both services. The ArchivesDirect Digital Preservation Assessment Plan is a 3-month subscription. The price is $4,500 for those 3 months. Of course, with that, you get one ArchivesDirect instance to process your materials, 250 megabytes of DuraCloud storage, but I think most importantly is individualized training support and consulting to help you determine what content, if you're not clear, what content you could start processing with ArchivesDirect, what the outcome you would like to have at the end of that 3 months happens to be, if it's a pilot, if you have a couple distinct collections that you'd like to process through the system. If you have no workflows locally set up yet to process this information and this content through ArchivesDirect, this package will provide consulting to help you create and establish those workflows. So it's a really great way to get started if you are at point zero. Essentially, you have digital content and are not sure how to proceed. The Digital Preservation Assessment Package is really great as a pilot or a test case for ArchivesDirect. If you have gone through the Digital Preservation Assessment Package, or you're in the situation where you have multiple collections identified, you have some workflows in place, and you're ready to go, then the annual standard ArchivesDirect subscription package at $9,999 a year will likely be the best bet for you. Again, one ArchivesDirect instance, 1 full terabyte of DuraCloud storage, and again, that's replicated in 2 places. And of course, individualized training support and consulting from Artifactual to get you started processing your materials through ArchivesDirect to set up those workflows and configure the dashboard for those materials and reconfigure them as you need. And again, that training and support goes throughout your subscription year. And it's not limited to just the first 30 days or anything like that. There's additional optional things that you can decide to add on at any point in time, including additional storage per terabyte, or certainly custom quotes are available if you have needs around multiple workflows, or you have large-scale processing that you need to enable, or additionally, if you need an integrated access option for your ArchivesDirect subscription. So you'd like to have access copies derived from the processing and would like to make those available either in an existing ArchivesSpace or Content DM repository, or if you're starting from scratch, perhaps you would be interested in the access to memory interface. That is another Artifactual open source software project as well. So the Artifactual folks are again experts and can help either integrate the output of ArchivesDirect with one of your existing solutions, or help you move in a direction to one that might make the best sense for your institution and the content and your needs. Briefly, I wanted to show the interface of ArchivesDirect. This is the Archivematica component, so where you would transfer and then process your digital collections. I am not the expert on this interface, so I will put a little plug in for my colleague Sarah Romke at Artifactual Systems, who hosts monthly ArchivesDirect information sessions. And she goes into great detail in the workflows and the use cases that you can enable and how you would enable them and process them through this interface. So I believe those are on the first or second, I think it's the second Thursday of every month, so there might be one coming up this Thursday if you're interested. If you just go to the archivesdirect.org website, there's more information there and how to register, for free, of course. But briefly, I'll just point out in this interface that there are quite a few ways that you can customize processing your materials through ArchivesDirect. Of course, at the top there are tabs. I think I can get my pointer out. Wonderful. Perhaps if I know how to use it. It doesn't really follow my, there we go. Sorry, just learning how to use a pointer in Adobe Connect. There are tabs at the top that allow you to navigate to where you transfer your materials into ArchivesDirect. This is the ingest or the processing area, of course, and then there are other areas. Of course, there's a user login. There are distinct content packages that are going through this processing area. There's in gray a whole list of microservices that you can enable or disable, again, depending on your needs. Within each microservices are very discrete technical jobs that are being run. They call them jobs. I call them very discrete technical processes that are being run over your content, including, so for this microservice that's normalizing a collection, there's a specific job for identifying file format, for instance. So there's a whole bunch of activity that happens to your materials through this interface, and it's reported to you. And there's also a status, of course. Oh, wait, I can point there. At the end of a microservice being complete, there is typically an action required. And this is where you can pre-configure. This is one area where you can pre-configure this interface. So you can always manually make the decision, such as creating an AIP, or creating an access copy, or creating both an AIP and an access copy. But let me click over here. But this is also an area where you can pre-configure. So you can script this process to run and always end up at the same action or decision point at the end. And of course, you can report or remove content or microservices that have run as well. So again, that is probably the shortest demo of Archivematica ever given. But again, I would encourage folks who have interest in learning more about ArchivesDirect and exactly how you would process particular types of collections and all of the microservices that run to tune in to one of the ArchivesDirect information sessions. Let me see if I can get my pointer off now. There we go. Once ArchivesDirect has processed your materials into archival information packages or DIPs or SIPs or all of the above, they are automatically transferred over into DuraCloud for, again, long-term storage. For those of you who have not seen DuraCloud, it's screenshotted in front of you. In the main screen, you'll just see the list of AIP packages that have been transferred on this customer instance. And you have the ability to view the history of the content that's been added. This is where you would retrieve all of those integrity check reports that I mentioned. You could download the materials or all of this content directly from this interface if you wish to do so. So lastly, I will just kind of recap, look ahead to what's on the docket for ArchivesDirect in 2016. The Archivematica team is in the process of creating an appraisal and arrangement functionality, which would be a step between transferring content in to Archivematica/ArchivesDirect and then arranging and processing it. This is a collaborative project with the University of Michigan's Bentley Library, and I believe there are several blog posts that talk about this in more detail, but it essentially will enable more functionality around appraising and arranging materials before you actually put it through the Archivematica or ArchivesDirect process of microservices and running those technical jobs. Also in 2016, the Archivematica folks are working on a tighter integration with DSpace, such that content that has been processed through ArchivesDirect could be sent and directly imported into DSpace or perhaps DSpaceDirect. Right now, you can export materials from DSpace and process them through Archivematica, and this would just complete that entire loop. And similarly, the Archivematica folks are also working on a beta integration with Islandora as well in a workflow that would look similar to DSpaceDirect, or excuse me, to DSpace, such that you could export your repository materials out of Islandora, process them through ArchivesDirect, and then re-ingest them into Islandora or some aspect of that entire workflow. That I think that beta integration is further down the roadmap in 2016 as the artifactual folks are looking for a partner to assist in the development of that. So if you're interested, feel free to contact the artifactual folks, but that certainly is something that is on their radar, and they're working on a beta right now. So with that, we have about 9 minutes left. I talked a little bit too in-depth on some of these slides, but if anybody has questions, please feel free to start inserting those into the chat now. And while folks are typing, I will leave you with just 2 more slides. One with ways to find out more information. Probably your best bet, easiest way is to email me, csmith@duraspace.org. If you have questions about DSpaceDirect, ArchivesDirect, or any of the other DuraSpace services. Of course, there's YouTube channels with videos, there's documentation on various wikis. But if you want to know if something exists, you can just send me a question via email and I can shoot you to the correct YouTube video or documentation page. Sometimes it can be painful to try to find what you're looking for. And again, while folks are typing questions, I will just give a preview of what's coming in the second webinar in this series devoted to the cloud services, DuraCloud and DuraCloud Vault. Specifically, I'll be talking about new features available in DuraCloud, the 2016 roadmap. I will preview the DuraCloud Vault interface, and I'll differentiate between the 2 very similarly named services, and it will be happening same place, same time next week. Maria asks, does the DSpaceDirect service include data extraction in standard format in the event of migrating out of the system in the future with or without a fee? It does include data download of the materials, and that would be without a fee. So if you just needed to download your content because you were migrating to another system, that would be free. If you needed help in migrating the content, so if you're going to a local installation of DSpace and wanted help, we could certainly assist with that, but you can certainly download your materials and then move to another system, and that would be included for free. Great question. Any other questions that I can answer for the participants who are still on the line in the last 7 minutes or so? And again, I'll note I'm the type of person who thinks of questions 2 hours later, so please don't hesitate to email me. The session will also be recorded and will be made available on, I believe, the DuraSpace website. So not that any of you probably want to watch it again, but if you have colleagues who may be interested or weren't able to attend, you can pass that along as well. I don't see anybody else typing in the chat, so I think with that, I will thank you all for your time and great questions today. I do truly appreciate you taking the time to sit in on this webinar, and I hope to see you next Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where I'll be talking about the DuraCloud and DuraCloud Vault services from DuraSpace as well, and doing some sneak peeks of those interfaces. So thank you all very much again for your time. Have a great rest of your Monday, a great week, and do take care. Bye-bye.